Shut up, Weeb! Welcome to the Way of the Weeb podcast. I am the lawful neutral and admin of the Christian Weeb group, Zach Johnson.
I am not lawful neutral. I am the Psychos D4, but you probably know me better as Tyrone Barnes at Christian Weebs. There are other people in here, but they've gone dead, as you can tell.
I was deferring to Kelly getting to go first on introducing herself.
No, that's fine. Let's make it through. Hold on. I got to call my puppy. Emma, come here. Come here. Come here. Come on. Oh,
Wait, you got the puppy back?
Yep. Oh, yeah, she's under house quarantine.
Emma. Oh, yeah, house quarantine. Oh, okay.
All right. Yep. Come on. Go on. Okay, make your escape. Yeah, she's,
Must.
Okay, go ahead. Proceed. Sorry about that.
Mama Bear, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, I suppose
Very
I can. Hi, I
professionally
am
this
Kelly. I am the one who formed Christian Weebs, but I'm giving the credit to Zach, aka Lawful Neutral, because it was his idea. I am the general wielder of the banhammer and, well, I guess the mama of the group.
Mm-hmm. The Bruno Buscati of the group.
She can taste your lies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I can smell them too.
That doesn't actually sound healthy. Coronavirus.
And we are also joined by one of our mods, Phil.
Phil!
Nothing particularly interesting about me, but you may know me from the forum as constantly commenting on absolutely everything, and I will not pass up a good pun.
I know, you're a contender.
Looking for that angry react from Tyrone anytime I can.
Yeah.
We all are.
That's
we all are. We live for.
I'm a flipping communist with those angry reacts. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah, I think Phil is a pretty good contender for my Empress of Puns title, except you'd be the Emperor.
This is 2020. I could be Empress of Puns if I want.
Exactly.
Okay,
it's current year.
I am not sharing my crown. You get your own.
I'd settle for Duke.
Year.
Y'all got a crown for Great White Shark of Puns? I identify as a Great White Shark.
I kind of hate you all right now.
That's what we're all here for.
By hate, he really means love.
Mm-hmm. So, topic of conversation. I guess first thing that we can talk about, something group related.
Yes, I was going to bring up the selections for the reading and viewing clubs that we got going on this month. We got a little bit delayed because we didn't start soon enough. But one thing we like to do with the Christian Weebs group, I came up with this idea a little late last year, is to assign some reading and viewing assignments to the group as a whole and have little threads where people can discuss things if they've never seen it before or if they have seen it and just wanted to discuss the topics. So what I've done is that I've broken it down into 4 different categories. We have the family anime selection, the mature anime selection, the
or
family...
if you can handle it.
Yes, of course. The family manga selection and the mature manga selection. So, around the time of the beginning of the month or at the end of the month, I take suggestions from all of the mods and admins of the group to put forward what we're going to watch or read for that month. And we put those up in polls, and whichever one wins in each of those categories, those become the selections. So, for the family anime selection for March in the year of our Lord 2020, we have, right now at the top of the poll, Azumanga Daioh. How's that?
I won't fault it for that, even though I was pushing for SSSS Gridman.
Mm-hmm. We have that as a selection as well, SSSS Gridman. Ascendance of a Bookworm.
Which is also good.
Yes. Inu Boku SS. And Somali and the Forest Spirit, which is a really new release.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have quite a bit of familiarity with Azumanga Daioh. That was really popular when I was going to school in Savannah.
Tsukurimasho, tsukurimasho.
I remember that English dub as well.
Yeah, the English is what I knew. I was like, I recognize that because of the tone, but I'm used to hearing it in English.
Yes. So those are the selections that we have for the family anime. I'm perfectly okay with Azumanga Daioh being the selection this month. So I do have to say that Inu X Boku SS has kind of won over my attention. That was not my suggestion, but just by looking at both the summary and the art style, it's definitely something I could get into. I guess I could give some. One thing I try to do is that I like to post little summaries of each of the selections into the polls so people know what they're voting for. Unlike, what's happening this year in 2020, nobody knows what they're voting for. We try to be an exception to the rule in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of Azumanga Daioh is a comic strip, essentially given animated form.
If you watch Lucky Star, you got a pretty good idea of the tone of Azumanga Daioh. Although Azumanga Daioh is a little bit more, I guess you could say, got some elements of Pop Team Epic in it.
Nichijou and Yotsuba are also both very much in the same vein.
I hope you guys understand that Azumanga Daioh precedes all of those.
Yes, it does.
We're using more modern examples to get them acquainted.
Yes.
Not everyone's as old as us.
Yes. So it's not like Azumanga Daioh is like those, but those things are like Azumanga Daioh.
Fair enough.
Yes. Perfectly fine to use a point of comparison, but yeah, these clowns came first.
Mm-hmm. And so there's my choice, which was SSSS Gridman. It's a relatively new one that came out a few seasons ago by Studio Trigger, if you like that. And it's sort of like a Monster of the Month Saturday morning cartoon, with like giant robots fighting giant monsters. And what was really interesting that got me into this, no, it's not Rika's thighs. Get your mind out of the gutter. What was really interesting about this is that the fight scenes are all CG. I know there's a stigma against CG in anime, but Land of the Lustrous, that'll get rid of that soon enough. But what was really interesting was that they sort of utilized the limitations that they had with the CGI and made the fights look like they were actually like people in suits. Because like Gridman was like one of those, like a show similar to Ultraman, where it was like a guy in a suit fighting different kaiju. So like all the monsters and the robots, they move like they're people in suits. And I thought that was pretty interesting to watch.
Oh, that definitely sounds interesting. A selection of trying to combine like classic Super Sentai entertainment into a more modernly approachable audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like the characters are likable too. It's got good tension. It's got good music. It also has like these like you can definitely tell it's like a Studio Trigger influence on this, because like it's an adaptation of a product. So obviously Studio Trigger kind of had to rein in on some of their craziness, but there are these moments where there's just real awkward silence, like somebody throws a ball and knocks a sandwich out of a girl's hand, and then you can hear a pin drop. Everything is just quiet for the longest time, and it's I can't even. It's just awkward, and it's just like just the silence builds the tension.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sounds like my cup of tea.
So, go ahead, Cal.
Oh, that sounds like my cup of tea.
Okay, so my selection that I pulled up is not one that I've seen before, of course, because it's incredibly new. My selection was Somali and the Forest Spirits. And this is a fantasy epic of a sort. According to the synopsis at My Anime List, the world is ruled by spirits, goblins, and all manner of strange creatures. Human beings are persecuted to the very point of extinction. One day, a golem and a lone human girl meet. This is a record of the pair, one a member of a ruined race, the other a watchman of the forest. It tells of their travels together and of the bond between father and daughter.
So it's more Japanese propaganda. The government is telling you to breed.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
That's the way we're going with this. I was thinking more like The Last of Us, but weeby. But you had to go that way and make it all political and junk.
Hey, if there's a birthing crisis, there's a birthing crisis.
Yeah, I guess there is. Well, that's definitely my selection. It doesn't look like it's going to get very high in the polls right now, but that's perfectly fine. Like I said, it's incredibly new. It's available to watch at Crunchyroll and
It
Verve.
definitely seems like a sleeper hit.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe the Crunchyroll Awards next year will be able to boost its popularity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
the visuals do kind of remind me of Made in Abyss. Made in Abyss. We'll be talking about Made in Abyss later. Oh my goodness.
Oh, of course. Yes. Because that was the Crunchyroll winner for Best Anime of the Year.
Mm-hmm. And deservedly so.
Definitely deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now
Adventures through Uncle Lovecraft's Funtime Murder Hole.
Yeah. Now, Phil, what was your selection?
For which category?
For
family anime.
Family anime. I don't remember. I would have to crawl back through the chat, to be honest with you. I think I may not have even suggested something for family anime, because when I saw somebody mentioned Azu, I was like, yeah, Azu is straight up what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like the fourth one in the choice was the Bookworm. I know that Kelly is way into that, and she appears to be indisposed at the moment. But I haven't seen much of it myself, but from what I can see, it's an isekai where the sort of bookworm girl gets reincarnated as a peasant girl and uses her modern knowledge to improve the lives of the people around her. From like the little clips I've seen, it seems very heartwarming.
I've actually watched several episodes of it, and I actually don't normally like isekais. I was over at a friend's house, and he was like, hey, you need to check this out. And I'm like, I don't like isekais. He's like, you'll like this one. And he was right. I don't remember how many episodes I'm in. I want to say 8 or 10, something like that. But it is very funny because she is very much held back by the fact that she has all this modern knowledge, and she is living in basically a medieval style setting. And one of the things, of course, as the title would indicate, is that she is very much obsessed with books, and books are a luxury because this is a time before the printing press, and that opens it up to all sorts of fun little things. There's a lot of good character stuff, which is why I like it.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So according to my anime list, the synopsis reads as thus. Urano Motosu, loves books and has an endless desire to read literature, no matter the subject.
Twilight Sparkle. Sorry, that other fandom of mine snuck out.
Oh, goodness, no. She almost fulfills her dream job of becoming a librarian before her life is ended in an accident, as all isekai are. As she draws her last breath from Truckpoon, she wishes to be able to read more books in her next life. As if fate was listening to her prayer, she wakes up reincarnated as Min, or Mine. You guys have watched the show. You probably know how it's pronounced.
It's pronounced Mine.
Mine, okay. A frail 5-year-old girl living in a medieval era. It's always a flipping medieval era. What immediately comes to her mind is her passion. She tries to find something to read, only to become frustrated by the lack of books at her disposal. Without the printing press, books have to be written and copied by hand, making them very expensive. As such, only a few nobles can afford them. But this won't stop Mine. She will prove that her will to read is unbreakable, and if there are no books around, she will make them herself. This sounds similar to the classic novel Fahrenheit 451.
So how many episodes until she invents the cotton gin?
I guess more than 14, because that's how many episodes the anime has.
She's going for the printing press, not the cotton gin.
Yeah.
I'll bet one of the first. I haven't seen it, but I'll bet one of the first things that she did was make improvements to her village's agriculture infrastructure.
The printing press predates the cotton gin by a few centuries, bro.
Yeah, it's set in medieval style Europe, not antebellum South.
Exactly.
Shows how much I know about history.
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, the cotton gin was invented by a northerner.
Yeah.
The funny thing, according to this synopsis, the story I was immediately reminded of was Fahrenheit 451. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that title, but it's a novel by Ray Bradbury about this dystopian future in which books are illegal, not non-existent, but illegal. Nobody is allowed to read books anymore, and the main character is a fire starter. His book is he's a fireman, but his job is not to put out fires, but to start fires, to burn books. And along the way, he has something of a crisis of conscience and realizes, and that's where the story proper turns from there. So, winding up in this fantasy world where there are no easily accessible reading material seems to fall into that kind of thematic paradigm from my immediate reaction.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Also, kind of like nobility hoarding knowledge in order to keep the plebeian peasants in line because, like, ignorance is submission.
Yeah, sometimes, but like I said, back when it was a so much more costly procedure to make books, only those who could afford
to read. I guess that's also the reason. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not so much. Maybe there were some people just trying to keep knowledge out of the hands of the masses. I'm not discounting that, but it's simply the matter of accessibility and affordability. It can do that on its own. That's why the Gutenberg press was considered to be such a revolutionary device. Because of that, more and more people were able to have access to reading material, and there have been whole peoples that have brought themselves out of poverty simply by equipping themselves with literacy. And you ask any historian or anthropologist, they'll tell you that one of the most fundamental elements of a long-lasting civilization is a written language and written word.
I mean, Alexander Hamilton, case in point, somebody that brought themselves out of poverty through education alone.
Yep, exactly.
Also Count de Monte Cristo.
Yeah, that's a good story.
One of the best stories ever told.
Also a great sandwich.
Okay, so the last selection that we can talk about from the family anime poll was suggested to us by the moderator Taylor, who also manages our Discord server. That's his primary role in our group. And what he suggested is Ino X Boku SS, or Inuboko SS. Usually the X is silent in these kinds of titles. And this here, a fairly lengthy synopsis, but I'll go through it anyway. Ririchiro Shirakin is the sheltered daughter of a renowned family. With her petite build and wealthy status, Ririchiro has been a protected, independent girl her entire life. But now she has decided to change all that. However, there is just one problem. The young girl has a sharp tongue that she can't control, and terrible communication skills. With some help from a childhood friend, Ririchiro takes up residence in Maison de Ayakashi, a secluded, high-security apartment complex that, as the unsociable 15-year-old soon discovers, is home to a host of bizarre individuals. Furthermore, their quirky personalities are not the strangest things about them. Each inhabitant of the Maison de Ayakashi, including Ririchiro, is actually half human, half yokai. But Ririchiro's troubles have only just begun. As a requirement of staying in her new home, she must be accompanied by a Secret Service agent. Ririchiro's new partner, Soshi Miketsukami, is handsome, quiet, but ridiculously clingy and creepily submissive. With Soshi, her new supernatural neighbors, and the beginning of high school, Ririchiro definitely seems to have a difficult path ahead of her. Now, this is from the same studio that gave us JoJo. So that
negative points there.
Yeah, sure.
Hey.
From the sole JoJo hater in the group right now.
Absolutely. The sole, at least definitely in the mod admins, I am the sole JoJo hater. That's for sure.
You don't really hate the admin. You just hate the hype around it.
No, it's actually the art style. I'm very sensitive. It's the same reason I couldn't get into Ajin, and Ajin looked like it was going to be very good. The art style just physically repulsed me, and JoJo is the same way. That said, though, obviously based on my sheer rate of meme reactions to things, I've thoroughly read the wiki on JoJo, so I can at least understand what people are referencing.
Do you understand like the artistic influences of JoJo as well? Especially like a lot of the poses?
Well, yes. I know that obviously it's trying to draw from Fist of the North Star and things in that vein, which I, again, did not watch Fist of the North Star either because of the art style, but I read up on it.
It also draws from a bunch of 80s action movies. Like I believe like JoJo was design was partially inspired by like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Sylvester Stallone and stuff like that. The mangaka, like as you could probably tell, is like likes a lot of Western stuff, especially like music and action movies, and also like different parts of history. Is like Phantom Blood has a lot of Victorian history and stuff like that, and also some like medieval history. The second part, Battle Tendency, is like it takes place in World War II. There's a lot of cool stuff with that. And then Stardust Crusaders is like a trip around the world, and there's there's different like little tidbits about like the culture of certain places and even some sanitary practices.
Yeah.
And basically it's like each JoJo, each part is like a completely different story.
Not completely different. There is continuity to it, but that's a talk.
Yeah, there's continuity, but like each one has a different feel to it.
It is unique. Yeah. But those are all the selections for the family anime for this month. Now I'm going to hop over to the manga section. The manga selections that we have are quite unique. I do try to, when I give suggestions for manga, try to pick ones that have not yet been adapted into anime. Those are usually the ones that I tend to gravitate towards when I want to read a manga. I want to read something that I can't just watch so that I'm not tempted. But we have a few selections from a number of the mods and admins here. So for our selections for the family manga of March of 2020, we have Yotsuba, we have To Your Eternity, we have one that Chris picked that is strangely pronounced, Soredemo Oyumu wa Asetekuru. That's the best I could do on my first try. And my selection, Spy Family or Spy X Family.
Yes.
So not terribly too obvious in the selections, which is good for me. I really don't like. I like to try to recommend things that most people haven't seen, or at least I haven't seen or heard of. Now, Yotsuba is probably easily the most popular selection in this particular poll. It's one that I've constantly heard of in the past, but I never ever actually got into it.
I own all the volumes. Big fan.
Good. So, Phil, you want to give us a quick synopsis about what Yotsuba has to offer to the potential reader?
Well, it is very much a slice of life, which is my favorite genre, which I know most people could take or leave slice of life. But Yotsuba is the girl character with the green crazy hair going on there. It follows her and her father, and I don't remember if he's a neighbor or just a friend of her father, but very slice of life, wacky antics following this young girl, very much to the caliber of craziness that you would find in Azumanga Daioh. Maybe not the level of craziness you would find in Nichijou, because about the only level of craziness that can top that is The Disastrous Life of Saiki K. But it's a very solid read.
All right. Okay, well, that's definitely...
the girl's hair reminds me of 4chan.
What? No.
See, I went to Mari on the hair there, except green. You definitely went a much darker place than I did.
I'm not ashamed of my past. Anyways, my choice for it was To Your Eternity, or To You the Immortal. There's a bunch of different translations for the name. It's written by it's created by the same mangaka as that's a Silent Voice.
Oh.
And it has just as much emotional impact, but this one is more long running. So there's a lot more build up, and the deliverance is a lot more potent as well. Basically, I try not to spoil what happens is, so it centers around this immortal being. In its most original and pure form, it's just an orb. And what this being can do is it can transform into other things and also other people. The stipulation for that is that it must leave a strong enough impression upon it, and it also can't be alive.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of things going on with that, like when it meets people, and just so you know, it's like this spans like over like generations and years and stuff like that, because like this guy is immortal, and of course like this won't be too spoilery. It's like I already told you, like he turns into people. So like as his friends die and he persists, he is able to use their forms, and he's able to use like their talents and stuff like that. Like one has a resistance to poison, one is a good archer, one is small that can get into tight spaces, one is big and can shoot fire, and like through like a mechanism in his mask and stuff like that. And it's very powerful, brilliantly drawn. And if you want to get a good taste of how the tone is for like the whole thing, the first chapter is all you need. It's like it's really good at telling you what you're going to get for the rest of it.
Marvelous. Okay, so for my selection was one that I've never read before, and I think it was actually recommended to us by one of the members in the group. It's Spy Family or Spy X Family, depending on how you read these things. And according to the synopsis on my anime list, for the agent known as Twilight, no order is too tall if it's for the sake of peace. Operating as Westalis' master spy, Twilight works tirelessly to prevent extremists from sparking a war with neighboring country Ostania. For his latest mission, he must investigate Ostanian politician Donovan Desmond by infiltrating his son's school, the prestigious Eden Academy. Thus, the agent faces the most difficult task of his career: get married, have a child, and play family. Twilight, or Lloyd Forger, quickly adopts the unassuming orphan Anya to play the role of a 6-year-old daughter and prospective Eden Academy student. For a wife, he comes across Yoru Breyer. Hold on, for some reason to reset. An absent-minded office worker who needs a pretend partner of her own to impress her friends. However, Lloyd is not the only one with a hidden nature. Yoru moonlights as the lethal assassin Thorn Princess. For her, marrying Lloyd creates the perfect cover. Meanwhile, Anya is not the ordinary girl she appears to be. She is an Esper, the product of secret experiments that allow her to read minds. Although she uncovers their true identities, Anya is thrilled that her new parents are cool secret agents. She would never tell them, of course. That would ruin the fun. Under the guise of the Forgers, the spy, the assassin, and the Esper must act as a family while carrying out their own agendas. Although these liars and misfits are only playing parts, they soon find that family is about far more than blood relations.
The first part of that just straight up sounded like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, only like anime level of nonsense.
Basically.
I see a lot of smugs screen capped of the daughter character.
Yes, that's possibly it. Like I said, she's a 6-year-old Esper. That's an interesting concept right there. So that's definitely going to be a blast. If I may just read that independently, even if it doesn't win in the polls. So for the last selection, actually comes from our admin Chris Lee, who I call our resident Galaxy Brain because of his level of wit. And his selection for the family manga for March is Soredomo Ayumu wa Asetkeru. Again, that's the best I can pronounce with my native English accent. Very short synopsis. Ayumu wants to beat his senpai at shogi so he can confess his feelings. Although the day of his victory is still nowhere to be seen, this is a story in which he may checkmate her by other means.
I've seen this one. I actually showed this to Chris. Like, oh my goodness. It is so funny how like the main character keeps slipping up and then acting like nothing happens because he's so hell-bent on waiting until he beats her in shogi to confess. And yet he just keeps like pretty much like half confessing all the freaking time. It's hilarious. And
That
she's
is
like
wild.
getting all worked up about it just because she's all like, just confess to me already and stuff like that. I know you like me and whatnot, and just keeps getting flustered. It's like, oh.
Okay, so one of those lighthearted romantic comedy selections. I'm down for that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I basically binge watched Teasing Master Takagi-san on Netflix.
It's
also
made by the same mangaka.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's why it looks so similar. Okay.
That forehead is unmistakable.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's like the same character, just with the hair dye. All right, so those are all of our selections for the family selections, both in anime and manga. Moving on to the mature selections, which we recommend for people like 18 and up, just in case. We have
crazy people like, I don't know, maybe not crazy, but like I guess like people who can handle their stuff.
Yeah, if it comes that way. We have 5 selections for the mature anime selections and some fairly decent ones. The one that seems to be at the top of the polls right now is a well-known classic, Mushishi. Now, this is one that I've been meaning to watch for a very long time, so it would not bother me at all if it winds up being the poll selection. It's been in my watch list for a hot minute, and everyone tells me that just from the descriptions, the aesthetic is right up my lane. So, according to the synopsis at my anime list, Mushi, the most basic forms of life in the world. They exist without any goals or purposes aside from simply being. They are beyond the shackles of the words good and evil. Mushi can exist in countless forms and are capable of mimicking things from the natural world, such as plants, diseases, and even phenomena like rainbows. This is, however, just a vague definition of these entities that inhabit the vibrant world of Mushishi, as to even call them a form of life would be an oversimplification. Detailed information on Mushi is scarce because the majority of humans are unaware of their existence. So what are Mushi, and why do they exist? This is the question that a Mushishi Ginko ponders constantly. Mushishi are those who research Mushi in hopes of understanding their place in the world's hierarchy of life. Ginko chases rumors of occurrences that could be tied to Mushi, all for the sake of finding an answer. It could, after all, lead to the meaning of life itself. All right, so that seems to be a rather abstract synopsis on its own. It doesn't seem like it would be that well directed. Like, I don't see any semblance of a plot in here. Just a setting.
Kind of seems like mimics, just mimics everywhere.
Yeah. Are you talking the Dark Souls mimics?
I'm talking about like the more kind of D&D mimic, where basically just like man walks into a bar carrying a sword. The bartender asks, "Hey, what's that sword for?" It's like, "Oh, it's for killing mimics." And it's like, "But there aren't any mimics." And it's just like, "Well, then I probably don't need my sword then." I laughed, the bartender laughed, the chair laughed. We killed the chair. Fun times.
Ah, those kinds of mimics. Okay. Yeah, I guess you could say it is like that. But hey, I'm still, like I said, it's been on my watch list for a long time. Everyone who's seen it, the way they describe it, it seems like the kind of thing that I would, crawl over broken glass to watch. So I'll definitely give it a look sooner or later. I guess none of us have actually seen Mushishi.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll definitely be exciting if we ever get around to it. Now, that was not my selection, though. My selection for this one is one that's on Hulu. This one is also a bit more episodic than a long-running plot, and it's titled Shiki. Now, Shiki,
yes.
According to the synopsis on my anime list, 15-year-old Megumi Shimitsu dreamed of a glamorous life in the big city. However, her unexpected death in the quiet village of Sotoba marks the beginning of what appears to be a ferocious epidemic. that turns the hot summer into a season of blood and terror. A young doctor named Toshio Ozaki begins to doubt the nature of the disease and comes to understand that to discover the truth, he must abandon his humanity, Jojo. Meanwhile, Natsuno exactly, an antisocial youth from the city, is haunted by the sudden death of Megumi and must realize the pain of friendship in the face of his own tragedy. Toshio and Natsuno form an unlikely pair as they work together to save Sotoba before it transforms into a ghost town of vampires, including Dio. Shiki, adapted from the horror novel written by Fuyumi Ono, goes beyond the average vampire story. It tells a tragic tale of survival in a world where one cannot easily distinguish between good and evil. Abandoned by God, the Shiki, as the vampires call themselves, have only their will to live, as they clash with the fear of the paranoid, unbelieving villagers. Shiki explores the boundary that separates man from monster. All right, so more mature Hotel Transylvania, is that what we're going with here?
It kind of seems like it has a similar tone and theme as Parasite.
Yeah, I can see that.
Anything that's vampire related, I am totally on board with.
Okay.
Vampire Hunter D.
That was
Before your time?
well.
Still good though. The art director is the guy that does all the cool promotional illustrations for Final Fantasy.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's done the logo design for every single Final Fantasy game that's ever been made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of course, I know you're a Castlevania fan, so that's pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Ooh,
Okay,
the
so
art
that's-
looks really good. I just Googled Vampire Hunter D because it sounded familiar. I don't recognize the art style, but I like it. So
That's a classic, man.
It's now at the
Mhm.
top of my list after I am 4 episodes into the current season of Castlevania. So once I finish it, I will probably be moving on to this.
That's only 10
Also
episodes,
funny
man.
how
You got time.
Also funny how you say you're into vampires and yet you don't watch Phantom Blood.
Or Stardust Crusaders.
Ah, yes.
But that's a tale for another time. Okay, Zach, you want to give your selection for the mature anime?
I threw in Basilisk.
Basilisk, yes.
I haven't seen it, and I actually don't know too much about it.
Really?
But I was kind of floundering at figuring out which mature anime to show, because the other things that I probably would have suggested would have been like some sort of trashy, ecchi harem.
Actually, Basilisk is one that I have a bit of familiarity with. I read the manga back in college, or actually before college, if I'm not mistaken. The Mayan synopsis reads, for centuries, the Iga and Koga clans, ninja clans, have engaged in a bit of war. But when a ceasefire is ordered by powerful warlord Ayasu Tokugawa, who really lived, the two clans are forced to put down their arms. Years later, Genosuke Koga, heir of the Koga clan, and Oboro Iga, heir of the Iga clan, have fallen in love. Through marriage, both heirs aim to bring peace to the clans. But their hopes are dashed when flames of rivalry between their clans are reignited, and they are dragged to another war. Ayasu's two grandsons have both claimed to be the next heir to the shogunate. To resolve this dispute, both the Koga and Iga are ordered to send their 10 best warriors to fight in a bloody battle royale, with each clan representing one of the potential shogunate heirs. 2 scrolls with the names of the fighters are given and are to be marked in blood upon the given fighter's death. The prize for winning is the favor of the Tokugawa shogunate for 1,000 years. Torn between their love for each other and duty to their clans, Genosuke and Oboro must ultimately decide the fate of their clans. All right.
A lot of political intrigue and tournament arc.
Yes, there's got to be a tournament arc in a story like that.
It sounds like Ninjas meets Romeo and Juliet meets Game of Thrones.
Meets
Kinda.
Battle Royale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does sound in that vein, which is definitely an interesting. But yeah, this is a pretty well-known one that's been around for a while, so there must be something about it that resonates with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't get too far in the manga, I did read it, just not the entirety of it. So, Phil, have you said your selection for the mature anime was yet?
Did I? I don't remember what I did as far as the manga and anime for this month. Let me go to the poll real quick here and check.
It's okay. The next selection is Danganronpa.
Oh, that wasn't mine. That was probably Taylor's.
Yeah,
No,
he's way into that.
He is, but that's original. Funny thing about Danganronpa is that it's originally a video game series, or at least an interactive novel series is probably a better description.
The visual novel.
Visual novel. There you go.
Yeah,
you can buy it on Steam. That's the point.
Yeah, much like Clannad, Little Busters, or pretty much anything made by was it Jun Maeda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's actually several Danganronpa series. So the one that I was at least hinted at from whoever made the suggestion, synopsis reads as follows: Hope's Peak Academy is an elite high school that accepts only the most talented students. Individuals who successfully enroll receive their own unique titles, suitably reflective of their skills and traits. Of the 15 candidates admitted to the peculiar school that year, Makoto Naigi is a completely ordinary individual who has been accepted by sheer chance, with the title of Super High School Level Luck. Naigi and his fellow classmates are initially ecstatic to be chosen to study at this prestigious institution, but these feelings of happiness are short-lived. They are soon confronted by Monokuma, the principal and resident bear who traps them inside the school. The pupils' hopes of escape and graduation hinge on one of them successfully murdering one of their peers without being discovered. However, if the killer is caught, he or she will be executed, and the remaining survivors will be left to continue the death match until only a single victor remains. So, Battle Royale in a school.
Mixed with Town of Salem.
And I kind of see some hints of things that remind me of Persona 5.
Nothing wrong with that.
Also Death Note to a degree.
Kind of. I don't know. I guess you could say that there is acting like the role of a Shinigami.
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of also kind of reminds me in a way of Assassination Classroom in that way.
Yeah. Instead of trying to kill the teacher, they're trying to kill each other.
Yes. That's a interesting selection. Like I said, that's just one of the many Danganronpa series. So I'm not sure if that's the one he's referring to or not, but hopefully it is because that's what's in the polls. Now, next one, definitely recommended by Galaxy Brain Chris. This is one he's been talking about for a long time. It's been in my watch list for a while. Hinamatsuri.
I've seen a little bit of that. That one's pretty funny. It's a bit kind of slice of life. It's almost like a reverse isekai. This sort of psychic girl is transported into some Yakuza goon's apartment and just kind of starts living there. And I think it's in the adult anime section because there are some there's just some more adult themes played up for comedy.
Right. He's constantly bringing up depictions of quote-unquote comical nudity. And it's not there to entice, it's just there to be a joke, but that may be a problem for some younger and more sensitive viewers. So that's why he wanted to recommend it in the mature section, which I entirely respect. Like I said, it's been on my watch list for a minute, so even if it doesn't get selected, I'll definitely watch it independently at some point. Okay, I think
another father-daughter story. Hinamatsuri. It's another father-daughter story, much like Usagi Drop.
Oh, okay.
Somali and the Forest Spirit, and Sweetness and Lightning.
Yes.
And to a degree, Shield Hero.
Oh, yeah, I can kind of see that. All right, so those are all the selections for the mature anime that we've gone through. The last category that we have to talk about in this section of the episode is the mature manga selections. Now, there have been a few. We have 5 selections in the polls. They're not getting a lot of votes. But the one that seems to be getting the most votes right now is my selection, classic, Blade of the Immortal.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, Blade of the Immortal has been talked about for... It's been praised in a multiplicity of ways. And at first glance, it kind of seemed like a Japanese Highlander, in a way.
There can only be one!
Exactly.
That's a weird concept.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of weird, but it's a little bit more nuanced and complicated than that. So the synopsis on my anime list, that's a little bit more concise than the other ones I've read so far, says Manji is an immortal swordsman who has been cursed with eternal life. He has grown tired of living with all the death he has created. He has no skills other than those of killing. Thus, he forms a plan to regain his mortality. He shall kill 100 evil men for each good one he has killed. The old witch, who afflicted Manji with immortality, agrees to Manji's proposition, and Manji is set on his path to kill 1,000 evil men. On his journey, he meets a young girl, Reen, who has her own vengeance to seek against the sword school whose members slaughtered Reen's family. Reen and Manji journey together, each hoping to find some kind of peace. In their way are many varied enemies. Reen and Manji are almost constantly under attack and must learn to live their lives avoiding being consumed by revenge. So, the manga, as far as I can tell, has been completed. It's over 200 chapters long. So, yeah, this, like I said, this is considered something of a classic of the medium.
Interesting.
Yes.
I do enjoy me a good revenge story.
Yeah, especially
Revenge
one
and-
with,
Revenge and
takes place in
redemption.
yeah, especially one with like a medieval samurai. Those are always fun. I am like tangentially reminded of Dororo in a way, but in reverse. You know, in Dororo, Hyakkimaru is trying to find the pieces of his body to help him live again. Well, this guy is trying to awaken his humanity so he can die.
Yeah.
Yes, but they both come across. Actually, that's a bit of a spoiler, so I won't go into that direction. But yeah, their partners are similar. Let me just put it that way. Their partners are similar. So right now, that's standing at the top of the poll. So if that gets selected, I'll definitely be delving into that because I already got it on my manga store map. Next in the selection is your selection, Phil, which is Ultramarine Magmel. Now, that has been adapted into an anime. But
Yes,
according
it
to
has.
you, the manga is superior.
Yeah, that's partially because Netflix picked up the anime, and well, we all know how that has a tendency to go. Additionally, the manga is actually well past where they've adapted the anime, and it diverges pretty significantly. What's interesting about this selection is that it's actually a manga out of China. It's not Japanese
Oh.
or Korean, which tends to be what most people are reading. This is actually out of China. The basic synopsis, and I'm sure you have a synopsis there, is that there's a continent that has just randomly popped up that's in the Pacific Ocean between Asia and North America. It's a new continent. It's been there for, I can't remember how many years at this point when the actual manga begins, but it's kind of like a whole age of exploration sort of thing because we have a brand new continent. We're going to explore this, but it's inhabited by several dangerous things. And there's a magical quality to it as well. The main character is his job is basically to go rescue people that have gotten themselves into situations that they were kind of stupid and didn't take the precautions that they needed to when they went in there. It's got a magic quality to it, but there are also some philosophical questions that are posed in the show. It's on the mature list because it is very violent, and so I enjoyed it because there's a lot of good character development and philosophical thought in it, and I eat that stuff for breakfast. So
Awesome.
When an
Well,
entire continent gets reverse isekai'd.
that's
Yeah.
basically it.
yeah, well, honestly, your synopsis was very thorough. At first, I was like, okay, there's this new continent that nobody's ever heard of before and is filled with dangerous wildlife. Are we sure it's not just Australia? Are we sure we didn't just misplace Australia and we're calling it a new continent?
This continent is definitely a lot prettier than Australia. There's a lot less desert than Australia has. So
Yes.
A lot less didgeridoo.
And didgeridoos, yes, of course. And there's no clownfish looking for his son Nemo. So,
fair.
next on the selection is actually, again, Chris's suggestion. He suggested this before, and it definitely looks interesting enough. The title of the manga is Candy and Cigarettes. And according to the synopsis from mangaupdates.com, having reached retirement age, Hiraga Raizo, 65, lands a new job that pays extremely well and is top secret, with no guarantee on your life. When he sets out to do the company's mysterious work, he encounters a little girl at their workplace, and gets pulled into an incident. Raizo took on the job to pay the medical bills for his grandson's incurable disease, but what awaits him in his line of work? Okay. So that doesn't actually give us too much. One thing it does point out is that it is from the same author who wrote the manga for Coppelion. Now, I remember watching the anime for Coppelion on Hulu for some time. It's a pretty interesting synopsis there. It's basically a story in which Japan has been plagued in a post-fallout state where much of the land has been taken over by harmful radiation, but there are these three young girls who seem to be immune to whatever the radiation levels are, and they are sent out by this compound to do some reconnaissance and extraction operations there. So I wouldn't be surprised if this candy and cigarette selection is somewhere in the same vein. And it does seem to be intended for a more mature audience. So if, again, I'm sure even if it doesn't win in this polling, Chris will suggest it again. So if we get around to reading that, we can definitely discuss that one. Now, Zach, you want to go ahead and give your selection for the mature manga?
Sure. I chose Bitter Virgin, which is like it's a pretty big departure from the other selections in that it settles a lot more. It covers a lot more heavy themes that like some people like may actually experience or have experienced. Basically, the story is about this guy named Daisuke, who's basically sort of like the Chad of the school, like just kind of like a huge, just a huge hound dog. And there was this transfer student named Hinako who seemed really shy, and of course like Daisuke wasn't even interested in her, but he was just kind of bored one day and decided to try to flirt with Hinako, and she immediately just recoils from him and is just really scared of him, and that got Daisuke curious. So one day he follows her into an abandoned church, and she sits in a confession booth.
Yes.
And Daisuke pretends to be a priest, and she basically tells of how, so it's the best way to put this for this general audience, she was abused by her stepdad.
Yes.
Got pregnant from it. And her mom forced her to have an abortion, and that's what she was confessing about because she felt guilty about that. And
in an abortion, according to the census, she was forced to put the child up for adoption.
Well, that was the second one. The first time it was the first time it was an abortion.
Oh wow.
And I believe she got that to try to hide it from her mom or something like that, if I remember right. And it definitely hits hard and heavy early on. Yes, and so throughout like the rest of the story is like Daisuke is sort of like of course like being shocked to hear about this, like tries to help her out and stuff like that. And the way that it unfolds, it's like someone who's a bit like, how do I put this? It's handled well in a way that people who aren't at all formally educated in clinical psychology as far as that can go. Like he does try to make things better. And there's even a subplot with Daisuke's older sister that goes into another topic that's pretty hard. And it's like without saying how it ends, I'll say that I like how it ends because of how honest it is.
Yes, it is brutally honest. It sounds from the synopsis alone.
Yeah, that sounds real heavy. That's the kind of stuff that you need to like put a warning on. That's like, hey, if you are not comfortable, yeah, this is definitely hardcore trigger warning from what it sounds like.
Definitely, especially for those who have experienced stuff like that and have not yet recovered from it.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so for the last one,
even so, if you're having a hard time with this, if you're at a place where you can stomach it, it might offer a bit of catharsis.
Yeah, it could.
So there's that. I won't completely dissuade anybody who gets triggered from reading it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not perfectly fine. Okay, so the final selection for the mature manga was selected by one of our moderators, Psychic Academy. Now, I've heard tales of this through the grapevine. I've never read it or even seen art from it until it was suggested. So, according to the synopsis from my anime list, let me see if I can get through this incredibly long title. Zero Daimyu, Kirupura, Pa, Azaraku, Vairu, Rua, Dorogu, aka Zero, once stopped the evil demon lord with his incredible psychic ability, and in the process saved the world from destruction, and earned the honorable and highly imaginative title, The Man Who Stopped the Evil Lord. Yeah, creative. Now he has accepted a position as a teacher at Psychic Academy, a school for gifted psychokinetic youngsters who have demonstrated incredible raw powers and want to learn how to hone their abilities. Among the student body is young Ai Shiomi, Zero's little brother, a somewhat meek boy who, despite parental prodding and his fraternal reputation, feels that his limited skills hardly justify his presence at the prestigious academy. However, everyone else is convinced that he, like his celebrated brother, is destined for greatness. A lot of pressure for a boy just entering adolescence. It sounds like a shonen more than anything.
I like it. I like characters that start off with inferiority complexes or broken. So that sounds like something I would invest in. Is it too late to change my vote? I'd have to find that poll, I guess.
You could also try Mirai Nikki if you like.
I absolutely love Mirai Nikki. It is in my top 10 anime I have ever seen. It's in the top 10 manga I've ever read. Mirai Nikki's fantastic.
Mirai Nikki, along with Attack on Titan, got one of my college friends into anime.
Okay, then.
Also, Diary Holder number 7 should have won. There, I said it.
I'm not gonna disagree with you on that one.
They were the most deserving.
Okay. So those are our selections for the reading and viewing clubs this month. So moving on, I guess we can delve into like what's happening in Weeb land that we want to like gush or recommend about. I have two things going on, one in anime and one in gaming. But if anyone else has something more pressing on their minds, I'm more than willing to let you have the floor before I get into that.
Does anybody want to hear about a positive topic or a negative topic?
I prefer negative first. I'm the guy who likes to hear bad news first all the time.
All right. I'm thinking we could cover the whole controversy behind interspecies reviewers.
Oh my goodness.
I know, opening up a can of worms on the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, I will be pretty silent on this, as until there was all the links on the forum talking about interspecies reviewers, I wasn't even aware that it was a thing. So I will let y'all take that away.
I first heard about it with the controversy behind Funimation dropping it so suddenly after picking it up. It's like, and of course, like their reasons for giving it was that it didn't hold up to the, I guess, moral standards of the show, coming from a studio that dubbed High School DxD,
Yes.
um,
Monster Musume, Prison
and
School,
Keijo.
Keijo.
Keijo's the best sports anime. I will fight you on that.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's very, it's on one hand, it's pretty hypocritical considering their past adaptations, but at this, but at the same time, like, I guess you can kind of see it coming with the political direction that Funimation has been taking lately.
I guess.
And of course, like the other controversies of injecting politics into their dubs, even though it's not true to the true to the translation. And of course, their excuse is making it more approachable for Western audiences. But like, I'll say that in that regard, 4Kids did a better job in that. It's like,
Really?
it's like, whereas 4Kids just kind of went like, oh, hey, it's like kids don't know about onigiri, so we'll call them jelly donuts. Whereas Funimation makes Luko from Dragon Maid
Yes.
like talk about like patriarchal oppression.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
So
goodness.
there's that. And it's like on most topics like this, especially on a Christian forum, I remain neutral. And of course, I always make it a given. Yes, such things that are overtly sexual and for the purpose of eroticism and to what's the word? Entice like feelings of lust. Yes, such things are on the side of the spectrum of morally deplorable.
Yes.
But on the other hand, of course, I'm the lawful neutral. I always tried to see things from the other side, from a different perspective, and from like the side of the artist, so to speak. And of course, artists are meant to be pushing boundaries. But here's the thing too. I've read a few chapters of interspecies reviewers. It's pretty innocuous. Mostly what I've seen is just a bunch of guys yucking up about sexual conquests and comparing their experiences with a certain species of brothel worker, let's say.
Yes.
And they put up reviews on this bulletin board, and people, in sort of like in a Patreon fashion, people pay them because they want to see more, because they're curious about like who's the best lay. And it's from like different perspectives. Like the main two characters are a sort of young adult elf and a human, and they also like tag along like some other characters with them, like this little angel boy that fell from heaven because he got a broken halo, dwarf. Now, from what I hear from other people in the group, is that in the third episode, when part of the focus is on sort of like an Ursula type octopus woman, that it actually shows a little bit. And of course, like with it being broadcast in television, even though like it got dropped, but it got dropped by one station, but got picked up again by another station. It's like it does kind of show things that people would consider explicit. And here's the part where I disagreed with most people about this. A lot of them were saying that it's hardcore porn to have these kinds of things, and my point of argument was from an Eastern interpretation of the line between ecchi and hentai, whereas they had a more Western view of it. So like what my line is like the line is basically the line between ecchi and hentai. Ecchi has a much broader spectrum than hentai, but the line between that in the Eastern perspective is basically the line between softcore and hardcore. Whereas in the Western sense, the line between it is far more ambiguous and more reliant on individual handling of such situations. Like some people have commented to me that like softcore, softcore, hardcore doesn't matter, and it's kind of gotten to the point. It's like, well, where do you draw the line? How much skin should be shown? How much like intimate action should be shown and stuff like that? Surely, there are movies that are like PG-13. I guess in the more Western sense, where you can consider the line is the line between rated R and rated X. And even from what I've seen and heard of this show, it's rated R at worst.
Okay.
So that's my experience and my stance on what's going on with this. It's like I'm not promoting the show in any way. I got bored of it the manga within 3 chapters. It's the kind of stuff that made me roll my eyes in college.
Oh, okay.
So, but what I was arguing was being honest in labeling stuff on their own terms through their own original cultural context.
A fair point. But yeah, this honestly seems like one of those examples where the controversy surrounding the product is more interesting than the product itself. Which, as a film reviewer, someone who's been having his film reviews published for a few years now, that's something I've been encountering more often than I'm comfortable with recently. Where people try to spike up publicity for their would-be releases with some hollow, unsubstantiated controversy surrounding it. So that's oftentimes, but not always, wholly unjustifiably exaggerated. Again, just for the sake of the idea that there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Which is a fallacious statement to begin with.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's controversy. So
yeah, he's like, if you're going to be using publicity to advertise something, if you want to get butts in the seat, then controversy is just going to get a whole bunch of people that care about the controversy and not even care about the product itself. If you want to advertise your product, show the product itself on its own merits. This is from the other side. This is the problem that Guardian Spice had an issue with when they teased the series. They put too much focus on the whole production team being run by women and stuff like that, and it being super progressive. But we heard nothing about the story. Granted, the art does look pretty nice. I do like the colors on that. But up until just recently, we heard nothing of the story. Although I did hear that it's an adaptation of a webcomic. So maybe in an effort to give the benefit of the doubt, they probably assume that other people have already heard of the webcomic and were familiar with the story and were more focused on the sort of, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to use virtual signaling, but the sort of appeal of the appeal of girl power, which is not a bad thing, or it's not inherently good or bad. It all depends on how it's executed.
Yeah.
So for benefit of the doubt, if I feel like it I'll chalk it up to a sort of like Dunning-Kruger effect, or
Yeah.
of like being already familiar with the source material.
Mm. Okay, so take that controversy as you will. Now, you said you had some good news to offer as well. Did you want to get into
Yeah,
that one?
there's mostly just a couple of upcoming releases that I'm excited about. The first one is to your
To Your Eternity?
To Your Eternity is getting adapted, and it will release this October, and I am super excited about that. I'm gonna be pushing this in the group as hard as I can, getting a whole bunch of like non-spoilery like screen caps, and I'm gonna be pushing this as hard as I can. Secondly, the Made in Abyss movie is going to be releasing soon. And I've even received an email from Sentai Filmworks advertising like getting some seats for like some limited viewing, which I might check that out later, see if I can get on one of my days off.
Sweet.
And I've read ahead in the manga for this, and it seems like it's going to be taking place mostly within the 5th level, because after the I won't count this as a spoiler. After the first season of the anime, they just got past the 4th level and we're moving down to the 5th. And this 5th level is a research facility run by Bondrewd, who is the White Whistle. The White Whistle is an elite delver of the Abyss, who was responsible for the plight of Nanachi and the very unfortunate Midi. And from what I've seen of this, and in the manga, this one is definitely going to hit a lot harder than the anime series.
Okay.
And it will make Sho Tucker it will solidify the idea that Bondrewd makes Sho Tucker look like Mother frickin' Teresa. It's like in scale and sheer heinousness of his actions. It's like just, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it gets that bad, huh?
Oh yeah. Damn it. Also like Prushka, who lives with Bondrewd, this little orphan girl that sees Bondrewd as Papa.
Mm-hmm.
She is the best part of that arc.
Yeah, I actually have to go back and rewatch Made in Abyss. I watched it, I think, like a year or two ago, and it's been a while. A lot of I always remember the general premise, but a lot of the details of the plot usually escape me when I try to think back on it. So maybe I'll go back and rewatch that sometime before delving into this movie that'll be coming out pretty soon.
I would actually recommend reading the manga,
or that,
especially up to the latest chapter, because with how I think the movie is going to play out, if it plays out like how it does comparatively in the anime series to the events that happen in the manga, there is no other way to prepare you for just, oh man, just the sheer horror of what's about to happen. Like, usually I'm the kind of guy that likes to troll and just kind of like, it's like, oh, watch this, it's all happy fun times, when really it's not. But I'm giving you and everybody here listening the mercy of read the manga, prepare yourself as best as you can if you plan on watching the movie.
All right, then. Well, that'll definitely be something to put into. Now, for my selections, a couple of things. One thing I'm excited and happy about that's already been released, and one that is soon to be released. The one thing that I want to talk about that has already been released that it just got adapted into an anime in January of this year from a manga that's a little bit older that was released way back in 2016. I'm surprised that it took it this long to adapt it to an anime, considering the fact that anime is a subject of consideration in the plot. And this is the anime and manga Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. Now, I first caught wind of this based on the anime production. I had never heard of the manga before then. But the basic synopsis of this, according to Wikipedia, is that Midori Asakasa wants to create an anime, but she's too disheartened to make that first step by herself. By pure chance, she meets Tsubame Mizusaki, an up-and-coming socialite secretly dreaming of becoming an animator. Together with Midori's money-loving best friend Sayaka Kanamori, the energetic trio start the Eizouken Club and slowly work towards making their greatest world a reality. So this is a story about three girls who decided that they want to make a cartoon. They want to become independent animators, and they scrounge up what little resources they have. They get this beat-up old warehouse as a studio, and they use their scraps of paper and pencils and put together their first animation like in less than 2 months. It's very short, but it is incredibly impressive, as little as they recognize it. When they first show it to the rest of the clubs, everybody is quite literally, as far as the animation is concerned, blown away by the work that they can do without a budget. It's just, but the funny thing is, while they're
Studio Trigger, eat your heart out.
So while the crowd is busy gushing and absolutely marveling over what these three girls have done, the three girls themselves are so overly critical. It's like, man, that shadow and that loop is missing. It doesn't look right. I wish we had more time to finish up that background. Trying to lay down the placements or the composition of that tank with only 2 value tones was really difficult. I hope we could work with more next time. You know, the kinds of things that really excellent people tend to do. I constantly read that the most excellent practitioners in any field tend to underestimate themselves the most.
Such as the curse of the artist.
Yes, exactly. And that's
Also the
definitely
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, that too. And that's definitely the case with these three girls. They're excellent at what they do. They're just far too overly critical, but they have a passion for it. They want to keep making more. So, and honestly, as far as I'm concerned, anyone who is even tangentially interested in getting into animation production as a career, you need to watch Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken.
Now, is this the one that the forum has been flooded with the artwork, with the 3 people doing the poses with the very flagrant colored backgrounds?
Yes.
That's part of the OP.
I thought that's what that was. Yeah, that's on my list because the art style looks amazing, and based on what you just hyped up about it, I think I just put it up higher on my list to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And it seems like, first of all, we're actually being a little bit, how should I say, insensitive towards our viewers. We do have viewer Karen has decided to come and join us. I'm going to throw her on. Welcome, Karen, to the podcast. We're glad you could join us, and we're glad that we got you interested in watching Made in Abyss. So, getting back to what I was talking about with Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, like I said, if I were teaching a college course on animation production, this would be required viewing, because it does give something of a crash course on the various techniques of like old animation. The girls actually have their encounter with the way like the old Disney animators used to do things back in the days of the 9 Old Men. They have the multi-plane camera. They have various ways to add different elements to the composition or to the layout for the shot. All of that gets talked about and delved into over the course of the story. And of course, there's always the fighting back and forth with the producer. That's probably one of the biggest conflicts in the story. The aforementioned Sayaka Kanamori, she's the really tall girl who always seems to have a grimace on her face. She basically operates as the producer for the group. And anyone who's worked in animation production, the producer is both the best friend and the worst enemy of the entire studio, because they just lay down the law as to what you can or can't do based on time and money budget constraints. And that's exactly what Kanamori does over the course of this story. The other 2 girls have all these big, ambitious, creative ideas about what they want to do with their anime, and she has to constantly reel them in and let them know, look, this fancy story doesn't mean anything if you can't finish it. We don't have the time for that. We don't have the money for that. And that's disheartening to hear, but, you know, one of the hallmarks of a great artist is not just what they're working with, but with how well they work with it, especially with limits. And one of the ironies that every professional artist learns eventually is that limits can be incredibly liberating in an ironic sense, because they cut out all the things that you can't do and just enables you and allows you to focus on what you can do with your limited and scarce resources.
Mm-hmm.
So keep your hands off Eizouken. That is available right now on Crunchyroll and Verve. I don't think that an English dub is currently available, but that's okay because I think that the original dub does an excellent job, and honestly, a lot of things can be lost in translation considering the complexity of the subject. Definitely check that one out.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it seems like the producer is sort of like contentious. Is that even a word? Adversarial?
Adversarial is the word.
Yeah, as adversarial as she is, I'll say that she is more a better example of a good producer.
Yes.
And for one reason, she only talks about limitation.
Yes.
She doesn't try to add anything. Because what I've seen a lot in the entertainment industry is a lot of things go wrong when the producer tries to make input on the creative process. Especially is like because with different like personality traits and temperaments, people who are better at handling money, the people who are more like structured and bureaucratic, they are not creative. But at the same time, the people who are creative are a little bit more entrepreneurial, but they have far less structure.
Yes.
And they're a lot more messy. So there has to be that sort of balance between creative freedom and budget limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And also giving the people who are creative as much freedom as they can within the box of limitation that you put them in.
Yes, absolutely. That's why these three are doing such a fantastic job at their work, because they do have that synergy with each other. And you're absolutely right. Kanamori doesn't try to inject any creative insight into what the other girls are doing.
Yeah, because that's out of her pay grade. It's like when you're a producer, if you're a producer, the creativity aspect of the job is out of your pay grade, and you should not touch that.
Exactly.
Much in the same way, if you're a part of the creative process and your job is to think and create and produce, don't touch the money.
Exactly. Don't worry about that aspect. Don't try tell the producers how to do their job, and producers don't tell the creative people how to do their job. You just
hear that, EA?
And another thing that makes Kanamori such a great producer is that she knows how to fight for the team. Whenever there is a challenge from the other clubs or from the class president or from any other would-be authorities that would try to interfere with their drive, she is the one on the front line putting those people in their place. Like, you just cannot get past her. She knows how to fight tooth and nail for her team and does so with incredible finesse. It's really impressive when you actually watch the show, how stalwart and how gallant she is when she defends the Eizouken club.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's absolutely unflappable. Like, you just cannot stop this girl. That's what makes her such a good producer. And that's what makes the other two such great creative forces. So keep your hands off Eizouken. If you haven't watched it yet, please go out and watch that. So in addition to that, the other thing that I'm excited about, this is not one that has been released yet, but it is coming out very soon. This is in the gaming aspect. And I'm sure we all have at least heard about it somewhere throughout the grapevine. But a couple of days ago, the demo for the remake of Final Fantasy VII dropped on the PlayStation Network. And just the demo alone is kind of taking the gaming community by storm right now. You can go all throughout YouTube. There are hour-long video commentaries on what people have said in response to it. Some people have played that demo alone for 3 hours, even though it only takes like half an hour to beat. There are people who have already done speed runs challenges on just this demo, not on the full game. The full game doesn't come out until next month. I think it's almost exactly a month from now.
Only
But
a
the
month.
demo,
Wow, it's pretty soon from demo to official release.
yes, it is. But hey, they
Usually,
wanted to
you,
get something out.
usually you like release a demo a lot earlier for some hype. Like it would be like a beta version, but
Mhm.
I guess there's already hype around it because it's Final Fantasy VII.
I was about to say, there's
and they
nothing you
want,
can do to
yeah,
add extra hype to a Final Fantasy VII remake.
yeah,
Exactly.
and they didn't release like a beta version as a demo because like I guess because it was already hype, they
Yeah.
wanted to show it's like, hey, this is what you're gonna get.
Exactly. And well, everyone is very, very thankful for it. It's not a timed demo like the Resident Evil 2 demo was that made a lot of people upset.
Yeah.
This
Yes,
one
it
is
did.
yes, it did. No, this one is a very, very legitimate demo. It cuts off at a particular time of gameplay completion, and it is very satisfying. It actually goes beyond the point that most other demos would go beyond. A lot of other demos cut off themselves right after you finish a major early boss fight. This game doesn't do that. It lets you play for a little bit longer after that first boss fight and get a few more licks in, and even come across some unique enemies different from the other ones before the boss fight in the demo itself. So this is a very, very meaty demo, and I can understand why everyone is so hyped about it now. Like, I already pre-ordered the Final Fantasy VII remake like late last year. Now, this is definitely one that I've been keeping my eyes on because, well, for a few reasons. The first reason is that rumors of a Final Fantasy VII remake have been buzzing around since before the PlayStation 3 was released.
Oh yeah, it was pretty much
Yeah.
up there with like Half-Life 3 and Kingdom Hearts 3 and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
the thing is, that was never officially announced. I remember sitting there, the tech demo. That's basically all it was. It was just a video tech demo for the PlayStation 3 saying, hey, this is the kind of rendering that it can do. And Square Enix just decided to use this video clip of like a remake of a scene from the first mission in Final Fantasy VII to display the tech demo. But because of that one thing, now the entire community and all the press are buzzing up like, is Square Enix going to do a full-scale top-down remake of Final Fantasy VII? And the first answer, of course, was no. But then, of course, nobody could let them get away with that. But they finally released the, I'm going to say, somewhat disappointing Kingdom Hearts 3.
I still liked it. I've always been honest with Kingdom Hearts having its flaws, but I freaking love the third game. It's like, if not for the story, for the gameplay. The gameplay was fluid. It was fun. It was flashy. It was the only gripe I have in the gameplay is the frequency of the ride attacks.
Yeah, that's one of the things that killed it for me.
It's like, but of course you can just choose not to use them.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult when I get into the heat of things, though. And there are some certain boss fights where that is required, actually.
Oh yeah, but regardless, I do like the little bits of closure that it brought in. Shion came back. She was my favorite of the entire series.
Oh yeah.
And like Terra came back, and it turned out Terra was Ansem's stand. Like, it's like all these little cool things wrapped up together, and it still left some stuff open-ended for what's to come later, which will probably be in the DLC. I haven't gotten to the DLC yet. I'm hearing
the DLC is a complete waste of $30 from everybody who has checked it out.
It's still like I've always, even like regardless of the haphazard way that the overarching story Kingdom Hearts was thrown together, it's just like, it's just something about it. And it's not just nostalgia. There's just something about Kingdom Hearts that just makes it impossible for me to hate it.
Well, I liked the first two games. Kingdom Hearts 2 is still the best one in the series, but we're getting off topic. Yeah, but getting back on topic with the Final Fantasy VII remake, I can understand why they were hesitant to go into that. Because in order to do a full-scale remake of something like Final Fantasy VII, considering the fact that it's so many generations behind us now, they're basically making a whole new game from the ground up.
It's all from scratch. Well,
it's all from scratch. Completely. They can't use any of the original assets.
There's like one thing that the scale of the demo itself reminds me of is the demo of Final Fantasy 15. And also that's another one of those games where people thought was mediocre. I enjoyed it. It's usually, it's like, and this is very out of character for me because usually I'm the one that gripes about the stuff that's objectively bad that people just seem to like for whatever reason, or for more sentimental reasons. Looking at you, SAO. But the demo for Final Fantasy 15, that one let you explore an entire area, go through a dungeon, find a summon, and fight a behemoth.
Okay.
And like it wasn't timed. You can go around and you can farm levels up to like whatever and just do whatever. And it only ends like after you like kill the behemoth.
Yeah, fair enough. The demo for Final Fantasy VII Remake is very, very linear, but still very, very, like I said, meaty is the word that I keep coming back to. It's more than what you're expecting out of a demo. And,
well, yeah, it was like from the demo, it's like the first mission that's usually like the tutorial. Like that kind of by design has to be linear. Now, once you get through the story and you leave the city and it opens up, then I expect to see some like Breath of the Wild, well, like maybe not Breath of the Wild, but like I expect to see some more stuff in line with scale of like say like maybe like Final Fantasy 12 or even Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah,
although like the scale of Final Fantasy 15, that one was like way larger and things were more spread out, of course, because like there was a road trip one. Like most of the places you get to by car.
Exactly. But I'm sure we're going to have. That's actually been a big question on a lot of people's minds about this remake. How exactly, since they're going with a much more photorealistic approach with this remake, it's a lot more photorealistic than the original Final Fantasy VII was. It doesn't even try to be like more maturely realistic like Final Fantasy VIII was. Like if you look at the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, it's like night and day. They seem to be very, very different in their character model approach and a lot of other things, even on the PlayStation 1's limited technical capacity. But
at least they kept the cross-dressing scene.
Yes, that's one of the things that we were wondering about. Like all the more gaggish and goofy and cartoony elements in the original Final Fantasy VII. How much more intact are those going to be? I'm interested to see how they're going to handle the character of Kate Sith, for example.
Yeah, because like the original release, it had like all the goofy stuff because like all the character models are still pretty cartoony, and so the comedy fit. But like since like Dirge of Cerberus, actually, let's pretend that doesn't exist. But after Advent Children, they made Cloud seem a lot more edgy and whatnot. It was like but at the same time in the original release, the edginess built. Like it wasn't just edgy right from the get-go. That kind of built up to fighting like Sephiroth and like Genoa and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was always kind of a distant mercenary, just doing it for the paycheck and stuff. So I can kind of see that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting ride to see how are we going to modernize all those things that is from a whole different aesthetic world. That's like, goodness, almost over 20 years old now. So the original Final Fantasy VII is over 20 years old now. So seeing how they modernize all that is probably going to be the most interesting element of it. Of course, we got a good look at how they've updated the gameplay. It's no longer the turn-based strategy gameplay that we're.
It's actually sort of a hybrid of turn-based. It's a sort of it's a style of gameplay that as far as I know was first employed in Final Fantasy 12, which is the first Final Fantasy that I played, where you can sort of basically there's like an auto attack and characters like move on their own, but through certain toggles you can select the abilities and switch between characters while time has stopped or at least slowed down. So it's a hybrid of action and turn-based.
That's the classic mode option to the gameplay. What is peddled as the default or the normal version of the game is actually closer to Kingdom Hearts, but it's actually improving a lot on the Kingdom Hearts formula, and that's when you want to select actions from a menu, instead of just going through pressing the attack buttons, the game actually slows down to allow you to make your selections. It's not like Kingdom Hearts where if you want to open the menu, tough luck, you still got to deal with the regular gameplay playing in real time.
Well, that's why they had the quick select options.
Yes, they had quick select options. They added those later. The original Kingdom Hearts didn't have that.
True.
Yeah. So That's one of the
Actually,
things
no. The original Kingdom Hearts did have that. They just didn't have it for X. They had it for square, triangle, and circle.
Yeah, they had it for. I don't think they had it for items. They had it for like special moves and
They
such.
had it. They had it for magic moves, which I always used it for Thunder, Stop, and Reflect. Or heal. Yeah, yeah. I always had it for Thunder, Heal, and Stop.
Yeah. But in Final Fantasy VII, they made the smart decisions like, okay, you want to open up your menu, we'll slow down the game for you so you can actually do that kind of a selection. Because they understood that those are two very different approaches to gameplay that needs to be addressed in very different ways. If we're going to go with an action-oriented format, then everything needs to be immediately available. But if we want to have a more complex turn-based system where there are a lot more options to select, then we need to give the players time to make those kinds of selections and strategize in some way. So the gameplay has definitely been updated for the better because there are still limit breaks. They still have options for limit breaks. Those are still a thing. They still have options for a lot of the other gameplay. Each character now has a special like alternative playstyle or alternative move. Like Cloud has his overdrive form that allows him to do parry moves. Barrett has some kind of concussive alternate shot that he can charge periodically. I'm really eager to see how all the other characters operate when we get our hands on them. But yeah,
of course, like a possible alternative for that style of gameplay is either kind of going the Pokemon route, where you can only like put certain amount of move in certain slots, or I guess that's kind of more similar to Code Vein, where you can get a bunch of abilities, but you have certain limited amount of slots to put them in, or if there are moves that you want to chain together, you can sort of put like move macros into pre-selected combos and then set them to one button.
That's a possibility.
But of course, with that, like this, with using macros in a MMO, like say like Final Fantasy 14, there's a certain amount of lag, and if it gets interrupted, then it kind of screws up the whole thing. Whereas if you were able to manually select an ability, it offers a lot more flexibility for situation.
True that. Well, we'll have to wait and see on when the actual game is released next month. But like I said, this demo alone is it's a feast to let us know about what we're going to get into. And I'm happy that Squeenix was smart enough to release something like that ahead of time so that everyone can really start gushing about it as they are. So those are my selections for the hype, for the selections. I think we can actually start getting into the end game for this episode. So
I guess
Zach, go ahead.
We'll get into. I guess we'll get into some Bible study, because this is in fact Christian Weebs. So to start off, I'm gonna go a little bit unorthodox with this. We're gonna start off straight away from the book of Ecclesiastes. And I guess we'll just start from the beginning with this one. Yeah. So there's like from my Bible, it has like a little preface. So I'll read from that, and then we'll get like started into the verses. So like the key word in Ecclesiastes is vanity, the futile emptiness of trying to be happy apart from God. The preacher, traditionally taken to be Solomon, the wisest, richest, most influential king in Israel's history, looks at life under the sun and from the human perspective, declares it all to be empty. Power, popularity, prestige, pleasure. Nothing can fill the God-shaped void in man's life but God himself. But once seen from God's perspective, life takes on meaning and purpose, causing Solomon, presumably, to exclaim, "Eat, drink, rejoice, do good, live joyfully, fear God, keep his commandments." Skepticism and despair melt away when life is viewed as a daily gift from God. The Hebrew title, I'm going to butcher this, Koheleth, is a rare term found only in Ecclesiastes.
Hold on, what was that, Phil?
I took 2 years of Hebrew when I was in college. It's Kohelet.
Kohelet?
Yes.
Okay. It's found only in Ecclesiastes. It comes from the word kahal.
Yes.
to convoke an assembly or to assemble. Thus, it means one who addresses an assembly, a preacher. So it basically is like I chose this one because I am pretty deeply interested in existential ideas, and just from like this little synopsis here alone, this book has a lot of very strong pre-existentialist ideas. Now, of course, for all those listening in and don't know me, I'll tell you this: despite what you hear, is like if you're not familiar with existentialism, or if you have a passing knowledge of it, it seems to be a very atheistic mode of thinking. But regardless of the people who popularized it, it started with one Danish emo Christian named Soren Kierkegaard.
May his name be praised.
Yes. And so with the kind of like view of viewing of things through like different perspectives, like looking at Ecclesiastes through an existential lens, makes a very strong case for the basic ideas of existentialism itself. And even though existentialism isn't really a structured philosophy, it's more sort of like a theme. A lot of consistencies between the different thinkers is a strong idea of individuality and personal responsibility and authenticity. Because according to the existentialist claim, in response to the threat of nihilism, which is the belief that like nothing has any meaning, the existentialist says that that like you're the only person that can find meaning in your existence, and the only way to do that is to live authentically. It's like you are nothing but what you do, so what you do should be honest with yourself. And putting a Christian spin on that is the way to best live your life is to live the life that God has created you to live. To be the self. It's like a combination of sort of like literary ideas of artistic intent and the death of the author. Whereas the death of the author, you look at the artistic product as a thing that came into existence on its own. But at the same time, there is still artistic intent. It came into existence with an intent. So looking at a human life, yes, we came into existence with an intent, but we don't know that. So it's like, from our perspective, the very circumstances of existence is completely irrational. Like, why was I born this way? Why was I born with these parents in this setting, in this time? It's irrational. Pascal posited such ideas.
Yes,
and
true.
So because we're not born with a synopsis of our lives tattooed onto our backs, we have to figure things out on our own. It's a sink or swim. Very much, and it's actually very much in tune with the idea of God the Father. Is that because the Father is one that protects, but is also the one that trains and strengthens. Whereas like the mother is more nurturing and protective and comforting. The existentialists would say that comfort is a trap. If you stay there too long, it's like granted, comfort is very essential in rest and recovery and rejuvenation. But one must not stay there too long. Otherwise they stagnate and they just don't move forward. And life is about moving forward. Life is about experiencing. But anyway, before I ramble on too much further, let's get into the scripture.
All right.
So Ecclesiastes chapter 1, first section, the vanity of life. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes. But the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. It hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And we'll pause there for a second. So, right off the bat, and it basically flies in the face of human ambition, basically, the way I see it. Like, we all toil away at things that are just ultimately meaningless. It's like we live, we die, and the world keeps on going. It's like our lives are just a drop in the bucket of in the entire motion in the universe.
You know, there's an old joke that the easiest way to make God laugh is to tell him your plans. And I think the sentiment that Solomon is trying to express here, that our plans detached from the highest good do wind up as just vanity, because they are not rooted or grounded in anything consistently substantive. They will become the dust of the earth, just like we will become the dust of the earth eventually. And if that's all our intention and our purpose in our life is, that will leave us as just dust.
Exactly. And shifting over to like another sort of like geek topic, within the Silmarillion, for Lord of the Rings fans shown out there, I wish that Kelly was still here to talk about this. There was one time I watched a video on a college lecture in theology that focused on the Silmarillion. It was in 2 parts. It was a really cool and interesting lecture. And one of the things that it talked about was the sort of like basic grounds for sin in the Silmarillion was to basically demand that God work at your pace.
Right.
Like, and one of the sort of like high angels, one of the Valar, Aula, who was sort of like the shaper of mountains and stuff like that, he was so excited to see the children of Iluvatar. Iluvatar is God in this. He was so excited to see the children of Iluvatar, which were the humans and the elves, that he took some clay and made his own in the way that his mind conceived them. And he made the dwarves. He made them all bearded and stout. And then Iluvatar looked at him. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing here? This isn't part of my plan." And then noticing what he did, Aula was very remorseful and sorry. And he was about to raise his hammer to destroy his own creation. And like, this actually brought like a tear to my eye. Just knowing that like what you did was a mistake, and having to like just deal with it and make it right. But then like Iluvatar stopped him. Is like, "Hold up, wait. I see that you're passionate about this, and you didn't do this to spite me. So what I'll do is like I will put your children to sleep, because the elves are supposed to awaken first, and I will give them life and autonomy, so that they can truly live as part of my children as well." And is that even going further back, Melkor, who is the sort of Lucifer figure in the Silmarillion, he tried to twist the song of creation, because in the beginning in the Silmarillion, creation was made from a song from the angels were singing, and they sang creation into existence.
Yes.
And Melkor wanted everything to be in the way he wanted it to be. And there's sort of an idea with that. It's a fairly new idea to me that I've come across, and it's the idea that Lucifer was the spirit of reason, and that was really interesting to me, because a lot of the things that we associate Satan with is like chaos and mayhem and destruction and darkness, but we often forget that Lucifer was a spirit of light, and it makes a lot of sense too that he was a spirit of reason, because reason and rationality, they tend to fall in love with their own productions. So basically, this is and this is speculation. I will not confirm or deny that this is anything that I believe or what I would preach. What I'm saying here is just an idea, a perspective, is that, let's say that when Lucifer was like the top angel, he was second only to God, he loved God. Let's say that he loved God so much that he wanted to imitate him in a loving fashion, to lovingly imitate. And that's another theme in the Silmarillion, was the idea that God doesn't create out of a compulsion or a need, but out of pleasure. And we as image bearers share in that same pleasure. We have our each own little micro creations, like producing art, raising a family, starting a business, anything that involves like some modem of like creating and cultivating. And it's like we're toddlers putting on dad's shoes, walking around like the big working man.
Right.
And so Lucifer loved God so much that he wanted to lovingly imitate him. But he was also a perfectionist. And that became the problem. Because as a perfectionist, in order to imitate somebody perfectly, he must become indistinguishable from them. But since he could never be on the same level as God and thus cannot perfectly imitate, he saw himself as inadequate and fell into a sort of despair. And in that despair, he tried to cope, but he tried to cope through pride. Instead of loving himself by God's standard and what he made him to be, he tried to puff himself up and basically say it's not that I'm not good enough, it's that I can do this better, in a sort of way. And that's what led to the rebellion and the spite. The spirit of reason, as it tends to do, falls in love with its own productions.
I tend to agree with John Melton's interpretation that Satan's main representation is that of the arrogance of the intellect. Yes. Like you said, because reason does tend to fall in love with its own creation, and when it does, it loses sight of what enabled it to do that in the first place, which of course causes it to go awry and become pathological. So in that sense, I think it's a bit incomplete just to refer to Satan as the spirit of reason, either in the Silmarillion or in the biblical canon. Even
in say Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it than that. To just simply reduce him as a spirit of reason, or to say that he was in despair, is to basically humanize it was basically an angel, a celestial being, too much.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like, it makes for a good analogy. It makes for a good, like, little possible, like, peak in speculation. But like, for a being like an angel that's so close to God, they're a lot more complex, even though they do tend to lean more towards absolutes than we do. Well, we kind of live more in shades of gray and subjectivity, which is different from relativity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like angels and other sort of like celestial beings are a bit more grounded in absolutes. And I think that's because they have a much wider picture of what's going on. And we have shades of gray because we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So like our shades of gray are us feeling out where we should be. Because we can't step out of our own subjectivity, whether that be an individual subjectivity, or the subjectivity of your culture, or the subjectivity of you as a human belonging to the human race. We can't step outside of that and see creation, as Kant puts it, a thing in itself. It's like we only see things as a reflection of ourselves, whereas possibly an angel, being apart and outside of everything, but also still involved, has a more clear picture of seeing things as they are.
Very true. You got to have that transcendent perspective, and none of us are capable of attaining that perspectival advantage. Not on this side of the grave, at least.
Mm-hmm. And so
you got anything to go further into the study, or is that what we're going to do for this episode? We are almost at the 2 hour point.
Let's see. I'd kind of like to go a little bit more into at least the end of the first section, which is about like 3 more verses.
Okay.
So, chapter 1, verse 9 of Ecclesiastes.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, that which has been is what will be. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. That kind of seems a bit more like into like the cyclical view of the universe.
Yes.
And especially even the human race. Like,
yes.
Like, you take a look, is like our knowledge as a human race has greatly increased. And yet, when it comes to wisdom, we're all born a blank slate.
More or less.
For the scientific advancements in the last century alone really doesn't account for much.
No, not really.
Especially in wisdom, which goes at a snail's pace.
Yes.
And it's definitely hard to, and of course that goes into the nature of science as well as epistemically. It's just, you can just share information. Look at our phones. We have basically most of humanity's knowledge in the palm of our hands.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is so easy to get, and yet wisdom is just it seems to be blown by the wayside. And especially with people that try to derive an ought, as in we ought to do, from an is, which is just impossible and foolish.
Yes, of course.
It's like you can say that the lights are on however you want, and if the lights are on, it doesn't tell you if the lights should be on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I said the lights are on, and I'm trying to sleep, turn those lights off,
Right.
that gives the odd. Or the lights are on, and I want to read, so keep those lights on.
Yes.
That gives meaning to the
Purpose
lights being on.
Purpose and direction.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that
also,
that can't be derived from the science. It can only say what is.
right. Of course. It ties also into the, like I said, it also mentions into the science. We know from thermodynamics, for example, that matter and energy can't be created or destroyed, only transferred from one state to another. So, in that vein, Solomon is quite right in saying that, all that has been is what will be, and there's nothing new under the sun, because everything that we're seeing now is just a different manifestation of what has always been since the first point of creation in one form or another. And this can also apply to the creative fields. It's something that I always have to tell myself, and sometimes I have to tell my students, because I do teach after school art courses on occasion. I remember one time during a workshop, I brought up a quote by an Anglican priest by the name of William Ralph Ingay. And one of his most famous quotes was, "Originality is just undetected plagiarism." And what he means by saying that is, whenever we champion something as original, all we're saying about that is, all we're really doing is expressing our own ignorance, that we cannot see where this work that we're observing at the moment originally came from. And you see that through countless characters in fiction, countless stories. That's why the monomyth is so gripping to us, because it is essentially the same story told over and over and over again in various forms and executional methods.
Mm-hmm. It's like everything like created can be traced back to the same archetypes.
Yes. That's why they're called archetypes. We just cannot get past them.
Mm-hmm. There's like, what was it? What was it called? Like infinite reduction, infinite. Like basically, like the archetype is as far back as you can go. Like you can't find the origin of the archetype. The archetype is the origin.
Right. It's irreducible beyond that point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are definitely things to chew on as you go through Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is one of the more, how should I say, somber writings in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Scripture is not exactly always sunshine and butterflies and rainbows and lollipops. It does get weighty, and appropriately weighty. And we can see that even in the New Testament. The parables of Jesus were not always exactly feel-good stories. They were quite troubling, especially to the immediate listeners, because oftentimes they couldn't make heads or tails of it. And sometimes even Jesus himself got a little bit frustrated. It was like, why exactly do you guys not understand something so obvious? He said that on more than one occasion, not just, to unbelievers, but even to his own disciples on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that might be part of like the humanity of Christ being subject to a Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, I guess so. So, Philip, you got anything to add to that?
No, we went off on a tangent there from what was going on in Ecclesiastes, but the analysis on Ecclesiastes has been good. I will say that Ecclesiastes is my favorite book in the Old Testament, and I'm not going to launch into my testimony or anything, but the
we can
message
save that for another time. We'll have
the message
we can
that
share
was,
testimonies throughout different episodes.
The message that was preached that eventually led to my salvation was from the book of Ecclesiastes, so it has a special place in my heart, and I'm excited that that's the first book y'all have chose to go through. So,
outstanding.
And like part of the reason why I chose it too, aside from my interest in existentialism, is that like I've seen some like blogs and articles talking about this, and they seem to just sort of disregard it as sort of like a lesson in error, as if these things aren't really like true. And of course, like sometimes like the Bible will make like examples of falsehoods, but they wouldn't dedicate an entire book to a falsehood.
Yeah, of course not.
Ecclesiastes explains its own purpose in the last 2 verses when it says, "The sum of it all has been heard, and it is this: fear the Lord, for he will bring into account everything that was done, whether good or evil, every secret deed." And I mean, Ecclesiastes explains what the purpose of it is. As you said, it's wrestling with existentialism and where we find our place, not knowing for what purpose we were put here in particular, but that we have been put here with a purpose by our Maker, and everything that we have, every effort that we make, artistic or trying to make a family, etc., is a gift from God. And in some way, we get to figure out how that us trying to be us plays into us reflecting the image of the God who created us in his image. And that's the beauty of Ecclesiastes in a nutshell.
Yes, it is. We have a comment from Karen, who's joining us in the chat, and she says she agrees with the notion of Ecclesiastes, and that she finds that it's the most relatable book in Scripture that she's read thus far. That's definitely an interesting way of going about it, and it's always intriguing to me seeing the various responses that people have to that particular book when they read it. Some respond to it in a healthy manner. Some have found, I'm not surprised to find, some have found their faith shaken when going through Ecclesiastes. It causes them to doubt and to question their position on the whole notion of God when they go through that. But I think that is primarily due to a flawed or incomplete interpretation of the writing, exactly what Solomon was delving into there. And I think you're right, Phil, that they probably just missed out on the whole purpose of the book from those final 2 chapters. That would have definitely given some clarity to their position instead of just wallowing in the angst.
Well, plus most people aren't too keen when they get to the 7th chapter, and there's literally a verse that says it's better to go into the house of mourning than the house of rejoicing. Most people don't want to hear that, but some real good face some existential question stuff in chapter 7.
Yeah,
and of course, like growth doesn't come from a place of comfort. If you want to learn something, you must first basically you first have to tear down what you've known before, and that reduces the structure within people, and that's scary to people. It exposes them to like the chaos that surrounds us, and it gives them anxiety, and it's sort of like the existential anxiety or angst is something that's ubiquitous to the human experience. Like as Kierkegaard puts it in the concept of anxiety, I'm paraphrasing, if you say that you've never felt anxiety, then I would say you were quite spiritless.
That's putting it mildly.
And
you have to go through those hardships and those difficulties in order to experience those kinds of growth. Real work is not done without difficulty.
There's no painless path to progress.
Exactly. No matter what you're doing, it's going to take something from you. It's going to cost something from you. It's going to cost your time. It's going to cost your energy, and there will be periods in which you're wondering, like, what am I even doing with myself anymore?
And those are the questions that you need to be asking of yourself. It's taking a page out of Carl Jung. Like the person that you most ought to be will always be found in the place you least want to look.
Yes,
because that place that you least want to look is one of the parts of you that's the most honest. It's like the parts of you that like you're proud of and you want to show people. That's not always going to be honest. That shadow, that darker part of you that you fear, feel disgust over, or just don't like. That's one of the most honest parts of you.
Yes, absolutely.
And to integrate is like basically like all the good parts of you don't make up for 100% of who you are.
No, they don't.
To integrate one shadow, and that's not to say that like you embrace like your inner jerkwad and be a jerk to people. It's being. So here's the basic idea. To be harmless is not a virtue.
No.
To have a moral high ground, let's say, for lack of a better term. You must be capable of enacting cruelty and to choose not to.
Right.
The amount of good that you can do is precisely proportional to the amount of evil that you can do.
Exactly.
The difference is your choice.
Mother Teresa could have done a lot of wicked and cruel things with her amount of influence.
It's like somebody who's physically strong, and I'm not presenting this as a pure dichotomy. Somebody who's physically strong can use that strength to help build a barn or beat his wife.
Exactly.
So, like, so with that, I'm actually kind of lost myself in this tangent. Tyrone, can you help me loop this back around?
Yeah, no problem. Well, first of all, I want to bring up another comment from Karen. She says, no painless path to progress. I need that printed on a shirt. Now, at least two of us in this talk right now are graphic designers. That's not outside the realm of possibility. I'm just saying. I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just saying.
I can throw something together and throw it on a little website. Oh man, if this group had our own merch, that would be interesting. Of course, like at least for me, I wouldn't do it in for profit. You know, just be kind of like a thing to do, and then just like money can go somewhere. It can go to like a church or charity or something like that. It'd be total non-profit, just passionate, creative endeavor.
Absolutely. I'm definitely down for that, but that's sometime in the future. So I think we're about ready to close off on this particular episode.
Yeah, looks like it.
All right, so I think a lot of these usually don't even make it to their 7th episode. I remember from research, but I think we got a lot of groundwork for how we can carry on from here. We could probably, I think, doing this on a monthly basis is probably a good idea for now. If we have more to chew over, maybe we can do like bi-weekly or nothing. You know, the term bi-weekly can mean various things. I found out it can either mean every other week or twice a week, which is
I think semi-weekly would be twice a week. Bi-weekly is every 2 weeks.
Yeah, maybe so. I've also heard the term
bi-weekly, semi-monthly.
Something like that.
It's why the English language sucks so bad.
It does. It does, but it's the language we speak, so we got to put up with it. So, for right now, we're probably just going to be sticking with the monthly option. But I think we went over a lot of points here, and we had a lot of good material to chew over. Hopefully, in future episodes, it will be filled with my artwork. You know, I'm a professional illustrator, so maybe instead of just listening to lo-fi streams, we could also look at me put together some stupid drawings on my little computer here as well.
Yeah, and of course, like back to what you said about the little groundwork and structure. Of course, having some Bible study at the end does give us something to do if there's nothing else to talk about.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right, so for episode 0 of the Way of the Weeb podcast, we thank you all. And how are we going to close this out? We can't do poses.
We could end it just like how it began.
Okay, then do it.
Shut up, weeb!